gaining control of this Middle East, Central Asian region, knocking down any obstacles, whether they be in the form of anti-U.S. movements or states such as Iraq, Iran, Syria, that weren't firmly under U.S. control. Once having done this and gained control of this region, Bush, Cheney, and company felt this would put the United States in a position, it would be a key element of preventing the rise of any challenger to U.S. power globally or regionally. And of course, the two main countries they've been worried about are Russia and China. Now, this is something that these people conceive of as essential to the functioning of U.S. capitalism and to the continuation of the United States' role as the world's leading superpower. This isn't a frivolous or capricious exercise in their view. Now, of course, within the ruling class, there are plenty of people who argue they mishandled it and so on and so forth. But the core view. Now, one of the great ironies here is that the United States went into Iraq, as we all know, on the basis of very naked and blatant lies. There was no intelligence failure. They knew full well Saddam Hussein was not a grave and gathering threat and that he had been largely disarmed. But they felt that Iraq would be a good first step after Afghanistan to establish themselves in the region and from there take on Iran, take on Syria, forcibly crush the Palestinian struggle, strengthen Israel as a regional gendarme, and so on. But the irony is that Iraq has boomeranged. Iraq has actually weakened U.S. power in the region, strengthened Iran's power, and in that way actually added to the necessity they feel to take Iran down.
Now the U.S. government is building the case for another unjust war, this time with Iran. The goal once again is regime change, to reclaim Iran as a client state favorable to U.S. military and corporate interests, including non-opposition to the Israeli government. Like Iraq, we are hearing more stories about Iran supporting terrorism and more warnings not to wait for the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. There are some similarities and some differences, and once again the news media is failing to give us the information we need, preferring instead to act as a megaphone for our government.
You know, it's really important as a first step towards preventing war on Iran that people keep in mind as they hear any rhetoric that's pushing towards war to have a skeptical eye. That the history of buildups to war, not just in Iraq or Iran, is rhetoric that is built on lies, the classic Vietnam Gulf of Tonkin, and just to not buy into it and be prepared for the big lie and be prepared not to believe it. As a great journalist from the 20th century, I.F. Stone said when he would introduce a topic to a journalism class, he'd say, there's two words that you get out of this class, let it be governments lie.
Our country is presented as defending itself against a ruthless enemy. And to do this, we must hide any history that shows what we did to start the fight and how we escalated it until we could appear justified striking back with a crushing blow. Iran is a perfect example, and a war on Iran would amount to terrorism.
Our second goal is to prevent regimes that sponsor terror from threatening America or our friends and allies with weapons of mass destruction. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
Iran is being positioned as the next front in the global war on terror. Despite the PR campaign to convince us otherwise, the U.S. government does not place a high priority on preventing terrorism. Before the recent Iraq war started, there was plenty of intelligence predicting that the war would increase terror, which happened as predicted.
The thing I'm most concerned about is that all these efforts on the part of the United States government are creating an atmosphere which is enhancing terrorism all around the world. There was a study that was done called the Iraq effect, and what he discovered is that the amount of terrorism has increased sevenfold times since the United States has attacked Iraq. Terrorism all around the world, and that's gonna be one of the effects if the United States attacks Iran.
The constant threat of an enemy gets hardliners the support of the population. Remember how most Americans felt on 9/11.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon. The nation sends its love.
When a country is at war, it needs a strong leader who will not appease its enemies. It must convince the population that its enemies are irrational and bent on its destruction. It works for the hardliners in Tehran, just like it works for the hardliners in Washington. This brings us to Ahmadinejad, the much maligned, ultra-conservative president of Iran. As can be expected, his unrepentant, anti-Zionist, anti-Israel displays and defiance of U.S. demands to abandon the nuclear energy program are the media focus for our official enemy.
When it comes to Iran, I think it's important that people keep Iran in perspective. Iran does have real ambitions of being a major power in the Middle East, and that's something to take very seriously. And their current president, Ahmadinejad, is somebody who loves to make provocative speeches and to do some really awful things. Particularly for Jews and for Israel, the conference that was held in Tehran a few months ago, that was essentially a celebration of Holocaust denial. However, Iran tried to sort of tone that down. That's essentially what it was. This is something that really raises people's anger, and is certainly seen in the whole world as very provocative. On the other hand, there is this sense that Iran is a religious fanatic country that is willing to see as even have nuclear weapons fired at itself in order to wipe out Israel, and that's just preposterous. Iran has always been a rational player in world politics, which doesn't mean it's been nice, but it's pursued interests and tried to be a part of the global community. The United States has not been open to that since the revolution in 1979, but most of Europe has, and has been dealing with Iran ever since then.
There's a competition in the region for regional power. So U.S., as we all know, is trying to get footholds in Iraq, and they have presence in Afghanistan and other parts of the region. So there's a competition for who could be, leading or who could be a kind of a regional power, and Iran is trying to be a regional superpower. But I don't think currently they're posing a serious threat to U.S.
Iran has always seen itself on the sidelines of Middle East politics. The vast majority of the Middle East is Sunni, but the majority of Iraq and almost all of Iran is Shia. A notable exception is Iran's Jewish population with full political rights and a seat in parliament. Ahmadinejad is worried about being perceived as aligned with the U.S. As absurd as it sounds from a U.S. perspective, the U.S.-backed Shia government in Iraq looks like conspiracy to others. His audience is mostly the Arab populations outside of Iran. By pandering to anti-Israel sentiment, he tries to present himself as a leader in the Muslim world. Ahmadinejad, a mirror image of Bush in many ways, is also trying to appeal to his base, Iranian fundamentalists and the military.